Walnut from Woodturning Tool Store again. This video is going to show how the process of making this box. It's a oak and walnut box. It's turned on 3 centers. There's one center there, then I did one up here, and then one down here. So all the centers were in line with each other. You can see its profile is got a cove here, a bead shape there, and then the whole outside has actually got a barrel shape, not a bead basically. Inlaid fitted a walnut ring here for the rim and one here, and I also put a walnut insert for the lid tenon, or the lid tenon. So that's it. Take a look at the project. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment for me on doing this. It's a fun project. I want to thank all you guys for watching the videos and supporting the video channel and stuff, and supporting Woodturning Tool Store. So, with nothing further to say, enjoy the video. Have a good day.
Yeah, so this is a chunk of oak I harvested maybe a year and a half ago, and it's about 5 inches long, 3 inches in diameter. Just chiseling away the corners with a bowl gouge. It's a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and then smoothing out the edges, or sorry, the sides, I guess, and getting a nice perfect cylinder. So we've got it round. Now the tenons get formed on both ends, just cutting the general depth, and then I'll use a special parting tool that I've slanted on the tip to cut the tenon. I might normally use a spindle gouge, but I've found this oak to be incredibly tough and hard to cut a little bit, so this was just the easier method for me. It's a great little project to do in an afternoon. You'll see next here I'll set 3 different center points for driving this piece. So unfortunately I don't show it in this video, but there's 3 centers on this piece. They're all in a line. They're not in any geometric pattern like in the 3 corners or something like that. So these are in line. There's a center and then one on either end. You can just see it there briefly. Get it spinning. Turn it up till it gets past the shaking of the lathe, and use a spindle gouge here, your roughing spindle gouge. You'll see that next. And I'm just turning a bead basically on the outside shape of the box, and I'll turn a cove on the opposite center. So you'll see that I don't show that turning, but here's a different perspective of turning that bead shape on the outside using the spindle roughing gouge. It's actually the best tool to use because it's such a sweeping curve. It's more than capable of doing this cut, almost better than the small spindle gouge. So take your time, follow the ghost pattern, take light cuts, use it high speed, and here I'm using cup centers for both the drive center and the tailstock. So these work well. Leaves minimal marks on your turning as you finish and clean up the ends. So yeah, it's just a process of taking cuts, stopping and checking, and seeing your progress, and just have fun with it. So here you can see I'm getting the rounded shape. I'm making sure I don't run into the tenon, and but also making a nice arc across the top there. Here's some fast speed for you. So it kind of shows the ghost. Looks as though it's completely round. The way the film captures the frames, every once in a while it syncs with the lathe speed, and you can kind of see. You kind of don't see that I'm cutting anything, but trust me, it's there. So it's fun doing it. I haven't done a lot of off-center turning, and it's kind of addictive. So one of the problems with off-center turning is they're hard to sand. So I had to actually stop the lathe and just sand stationary, just held on the lathe and just kind of get some of the bigger tool marks out and stuff. So power sanded through the grits and then did some hand sanding in between across the grain. So it's useful. So here you can see I've skipped showing you the cove cut, but it's the same thing. Did the move the centers across to the far end and cut out the cove. And now turn it back to the center drive points, and we're going to put a little arc across the center as well. So it's got a bead shape, a cove shape, and now a barrel shape. So, and the flats here, you got to watch as you cut this barrel shape that you don't cut too far into those, and just kind of leave the full cove shape as much as possible. I think aesthetically it just looks more pleasing that way. So again, back with the spindle roughing gouge. Make sure you sharpen it up and stuff between these cuts. You just want to make sure you got a nice sharp tool to make these cuts and stuff. So that's some handy advice. So speed it up a little bit. You kind of get the idea of what's going on. So it's turned on 3 centers with 3 different sort of arcing cuts. So I cut a lot of footage out, but you want to stop and check and see your progress as you go. Make sure you kind of get an even sort of cut where you want it. You can see I'm checking those flats again to make sure I'm not taking those completely away. So now it's time to part it. So I've sanded as much as I can by with power sander, hand sanding. I used a 1/4 inch parting tool to cut the wide gap, and then use a thin parting tool to actually part the piece down to probably 1/4 inch, and then use a little handsaw and cut it free. This kind of thing between centers you don't want to cut with part off complete with the parting tool. Ease off on the tool rest, tailstock pressure, and it helps get rid of the pressure on the handsaw. So with this project I decided to use some contrasting wood. This is some walnut I harvested a couple of years ago as well, and made some center rings on both the top and the bottom. I don't actually show the turning of the rings, but take a look at the Olympic flag demo or video and you'll see how I turn rings. It's fairly simple, but the practice is helpful in this project. So at this stage, I'm cleaning up I guess the top of the bottom, if you will. This is the bottom section chucked up, and I'm cutting the tenon to fit the walnut ring. So you'll see that here. I'll stop the lathe, and I've already cut a ring, mounted the one on the top, and now I've got one that I've got for the bottom. I'm sizing that tenon, if you will, to fit the ring center. So that'll become part of the box, and just trying to make sure it fits okay. You can kind of see it there how it's going to go on, and then the center part will be hollowed out. So to glue the ring on, use a chuck in the tailstock on a Morse taper adapter. Use some CA glue up the face of the box, and then I spray accelerator on the walnut part, and then use the tailstock pressure, the jaws of the second chuck and the tailstock to secure the ring to the bottom of the box and apply pressure. And it's just a convenient way to do it. You just got to make sure everything's lined up. With the accelerator on there, it's going to set quickly. So it's kind of a quick action thing, but everything worked out okay. So the next thing is we hollow the inside of the box a little bit using a variety of tools, spindle gouge here, and then some box scraper to make square sides. I'm actually going to make an insert, I guess, a collar on the inside of the box out of walnut as well. So once you finish hollowing the inside, then I'll take it off and take that box off, and now I've got a piece of that walnut mounted here. I'm making that inner collar, cutting it down to size, using this parting tool kind of like a skew, just to kind of get right down to the close diameter that I need. And this diameter is going to fit inside the bottom of the box, and then I'll once it's in the box, I'll trim it to fit the lid. So just some nice, easy, gentle work with the parting tool, acting kind of like a skew. So getting very close to the size I need, I stop the lathe and grab the bottom of the box, which is still in the other chuck, and just test fit that tenon fit to the bottom, and it's a good snug fit. So before parting that bottom off, I just hollowed it out, and now I'm marking for depth how tall I want that insert to be, and thin parting tool, and this goes quick because it is hollow, so it'll just pop right off the lathe. There you go. So now we've got that in the bottom of the box. I've used the same method as you saw before with the CA glue and the chuck jaws, pressing it in there. So now I'm sizing this insert, or the collar, to fit the top of the lid. So I'm cutting only the very first 1/16 inch of that depth of that collar, to make sure I get the right size on the top. So once I get the right size at the first 1/16 inch, I finish up the rest of it. I ease the corner a little bit just so that we can have an easy fit to get the lid on there at first. And there we go. We got a good fit. And I want a tight fit right now because I'm going to turn the top next. So I bring up the tailstock just for extra support and start turning the top. So while I've got this with the tailstock support, I take a scraper and just clean up the two walnut center rings first with the scraper, and then get a little point tool and get in there and just kind of round them over a little bit. Sanding after this will kind of take over or finish up the rounding over those two center discs. Now to the top and top of the top, taking away the tenon, and I get that done fairly quickly, and then pull away the tailstock, or start with a spindle gouge and start cleaning up the top. I don't pull away the tailstock yet until I finish this part of it. So nice little detail gouge or spindle gouge, and just some really fine cuts to really clean up, and so there's minimal sanding here to do. That's really the goal of trying to make all these cuts. I'm also deciding on what I'm doing with the top a little bit. I know on this box I want a flat sort of top, or a top that at least sits flat on the table, so that's kind of what I'm going for. Fairly clean cuts. Now I've put some blue tape around the center just for extra security. Pull the tailstock away and nibble away with really fine cuts, small cuts, so we're not putting too much pressure on the top here, because we don't want it to pop off. But shouldn't happen with the blue tape on there. But some nice fine cuts to get rid of that top nib, and then some scraping cuts, and then some fine gouge cuts here to follow up and clean up the top. So the last little cut here, and take a look at what we've got. We stopped the lathe, and some really nice cuts, and it's flat across the top, so that's good news. And now just add a little decoration, a little interest at the top. Get the point tool and cut in a couple of of rings. So once that's done, you kind of, with the point, you kind of swivel it back and forth and rotate it to kind of round over those edges of those rings. So, and then it's sanded, and at this point, everything's sanded on the top. So we remove the tape and proceed to um, polish it up. I got a little bit of sanding wax, I guess, on this, as well as a top coat of some nice hard wax. So that's kind of the finishing schedule with this. Fairly simple. And there, the top is done. So now that we've got the top off and finished, it's time to clean up the inside of that tenon center. That's done. Some final cleanup cuts and some sanding, and I had a few, tool marks, I guess, on the very inside of this ring by the tenon. So I decided to disguise them with a couple of rings. So get the point tool out again, put a couple of rings in there, and yeah, it looks pretty good. So some final sanding, and then I think at this point some finishing work. Again, the polishing wax with a hard wax on top, and that really brings out this walnut figure very nicely. And it's a great contrasting wood with the oak. The oak has some darker streaks in it. Looks very nice. So with the top of the bottom done, now we look at the bottom of the bottom, if you will. I put some green tape around the tenon in the middle, and grip the bottom that way to protect the tape is there to protect the tenon a little bit, and then we spin up the lathe, and again using a small spindle, well, I think it's 3/8 spindle gouge, detail gouge. We take some nice light cuts to get rid of this center point on the bottom, and continue with some nice cuts and nibbling away the tenon itself. That takes a little bit of time because you want to go slow and take small cuts. And then you can, make some nice finishing cuts across the bottom to clean up the bottom, and do some final scraping to clean up everything that you got there. And to add some symmetry, like I did with the top, I'm going to put a few rings in the bottom here to sort of put a cap on the design, I guess you will. So the top has 2 rings, and the bottom does as well, and so do the inside rings. At least the one ring does. And the same finishing schedule as before: polishing wax followed by hard surface wax, and it comes out really nice. With this off-center turning, you have to do some of this polishing by hand, so buffing wheels would probably help here. Well, that's it. Box is done. Let's get this in focus. There we go. Good job. Nice little form. Kind of looks like a twisted box. Not really twisted, but bent box, I guess, if you will. There you go. Well, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.